AOC and Yoho. As a warning, this of course contains language some might find offensive, but is always an odd thing to say in a democracy that has freedom of expression and a lot of issues there. But let's get to the main focus. So Representative Ocasio-Cortez, best known as AOC, was called disgusting, crazy, and dangerous by Representative Yoho. He was apparently upset because she'd expressed agreement with the rather plausible claim that poverty is linked to crime rates in New York City. As Yoho walked away from AOC, he was overheard calling her, and here is the offensive language, a fucking bitch. I'm not going to rush to AOC's defense, like a knight in shining armor. She is able to champion herself and can slay her own dragons. So in response to this insult, she displayed strength of character, courage, and a concern for others. As such, she stood in stark contrast with President Trump, who responds to even just criticism with unbalanced display of weakness, dishonesty, and self-obsession. As should be expected, people did step up to defend Yoho and attack AOC. As would also be expected, many of these appeared on Facebook. One interesting example that I encountered myself involved making the claim that AOC and her supporters think that calling people racist and sexist is acceptable. This was juxtaposed against Yoho just using naughty words. The closing point was to sarcastically note that AOC had surely never used such words. There's a lot going on in there. Now, as a rhetorical tactic, this move is clever. The idea that AOC is unjustly mad at Yoho because she does worse things, calling people sexist and racist, and she is also a hypocrite because she has also used such words. But this largely rests on an attempt at a false equivalence. If someone is a racist, sexist, or white supremacist, then knowing this fact is morally fine. Speaking truth of evil is generally a good action. To use an obvious analogy, testifying that a murderer is generally a good action. But calling someone, and again, warning for language, a fucking bitch, is a very different sort of thing. Laying aside the problem that the language is unprofessional, it is a very personal attack. It does not seem to call out any specific moral problem with a person. So calling a racist is rather different from calling her a fucking bitch. Oh, sorry, warning. Obviously enough, knowingly calling a person a racist or sexist when they are not would be morally wrong, and would be worse than calling someone a warning for language, fucking bitch. After all, being falsely accused of sexism or racism could have serious, unwarranted consequences for a person, such as being reprimanded or losing their job. If AOC did falsely accuse people of being sexist or racist, then she certainly should be called out, but she doesn't seem to do this. And even if she did, calling her, again, language warning, a fucking bitch, would not be a morally appropriate response. I do understand that people can get angry and say things they would not say when cool-headed. We've all done this. But that is why we should accept good faith, honest apologies. People should have a chance at redemption. Now, Yoho did offer a response and followed a fairly standard tactic. He stated that he has a wife and 2 daughters. The implied logic behind this tactic seems to be what could be called appeal to daughter. You could also appeal to wife, appeal to mother. Here's the idea. Premise 1, laid out in logic form. Again, philosophy professor, so this is what I do. Man M says or does S, that seems sexist. Premise 2, man M says that they have a daughter, wife, or mother. Conclusion, S is not sexist, or M should be excused for S, or M is not sexist. So in the case, to use a concrete example, Yoho calls AOC, again, language alert, a fucking bitch. Yoho says that he has a wife and 2 daughters, so we're supposed to conclude that that remark was not sexist, which probably is, or that Yoho should be excused for that remark, or that he himself is not sexist, that he simply, had a, bad episode. Now, it is true that having a daughter can influence a father's view of gender equality. For example, such fathers can shift towards being more progressive on issues like equal pay and sexual harassment. But referencing a daughter does not prove that a person actually has such views. That it does not follow that what they did or said was not sexist, or should be excused. It is also true that most men would be upset if someone said or did something sexist to a woman or girl they cared about. Yoho, one assumes, would be outraged if some guy called his wife or daughters, again language alert, fucking bitches. But their concern about the woman and girls they care about does not entail that they care about other women and girls in general. To draw this obvious analogy, it's like the "I have a black friend" defense when someone is accused of being racist. That could be true, that they have a black friend, but it does not follow that they are not racist. Obviously, every sexist has a mother, many are married, and also some have daughters. There is also the point that has often been made. When people, even from good intentions, invoke the fact that there are women they care about when talking about sexism, this seems to imply that a person only cares about sexism because of their personal stake, that if they did not have a daughter, for example, such sexism wouldn't matter. Now, this might be unfair. When people make this point, they're most likely engaged in explaining why it really matters to them, rather than providing proof they only care because of their own stake in the matter. So, if someone, speaks out against, sexism, it would seem fairly normal if they have, a wife or daughter to bring this up. And perhaps they have no, ill intent, behind that. Now, but it is a point worth considering that the critics, of this raise, is that people should, if they're good people, care about sexism not just because they care about specific women, but because it is the right thing to do. So, stay safe, stay alive, and I'll see you in the future.